Blockchain for new business models. In the fast-paced world, we simply have to adjust, and so do the modern businesses. How does one run their project on blockchain? Where are the gaps? Let's find out together. Moderated by Halbame Ojamu, with Warren Sample, Vorto Network, Brian Rogers, AB Foundation, Alexis Roussel, NYM Technologies SA, and Jonathan Caras, Phobos Finance and Lions Chain Capital.
Hey, hello everybody. Working? Yes. Last panel of the day. Very impressed you're here. So it's obviously been a pretty interesting year, 18 months with blockchain and crypto and everything else, but an even more interesting week at what's gone on. So we've got a pretty diverse panel here to cover a lot of range of topics. My name's Hal Baim. I'm CEO partner of Ojamu. We're bringing AI, machine learning, NFTs, a suite of intelligent tools to brands to bring them into the next era of digital marketing. I'm going to let each panelist kind of introduce themselves, because I think you know yourselves better than I could try to introduce you, and we'll go from there. So, Jonathan, you want to start?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Caras. I'm a partner at Lions Chain Capital, a multi-strategy crypto hedge fund, and the founder of Phobos, which builds the Levana protocol.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Warren Sample. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Vorto Gaming in Sweden, originally from Silicon Valley area, but a few decades in the Nordics now in Europe, and extensive operations in emerging markets dealing with unbanked and stored value.
Hello, I'm Brian Rogers. I'm the director on the AIBC Blockchain Foundation, and I'm also here with Neurothic, which I'm the CEO and founder of.
Hello, I'm Alexis Roussel. I'm the CEO of NIM Technologies. So we build a privacy mixnet. It's a privacy infrastructure so that surveillance, we can remove the metadata when sending data in the network. And we decided to use a blockchain infrastructure while the people in the network are sharing resources. So that's the link with the subject.
Exactly, great. So, I mean, one thing that's been interesting, not just in the last year of obviously blockchain and crypto, but is this little pandemic that we're all experiencing right now across the world. And, you know, with that, it's obviously accelerated all the new business models. Companies that were thinking about potentially going 100% into the digital space or accelerating their e-commerce activities or digital marketing, they've been forced to. A lot of companies didn't survive. The ones that did either already had a good base for it, or they've moved on to really, really focus and make sure that their business has incredible online capability. But what's not talked a lot about is the business models to support this. It's not just about putting your products online, but it could be anything from your margins to the way you market it, to the way you produce it, to anything else. So let me start with Warren. Gaming. I used to work for PlayStation for years, running a number of countries. One of my earliest things and halfway through my gaming career was doing Formula One, which brought me to Abu Dhabi quite a bit for the earliest races and other things. With the rise of NFTs, we've seen a lot of this, mainly in terms of digital art. But there's obviously some really interesting things going on with gaming in the NFT space, and gaming in general, and gaming being run on blockchain technology for the first time. What are some of the things that excite you the most, and what do you think it's going to take for gaming to really get mainstream adoption on blockchain?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the gaming community is a very special community. 2.9 billion people, and probably also grew last year from the pandemic as people looked for retreats and refuge from, the day-to-day grind. But, it's a community and a network that's already extremely sticky. They're very passionate about what they do. And those 2.9 billion folks have been propelling that whole industry in gaming to revenues of 181 billion a year. So the growth is there, and that's in the next 5 years going to be achieving the realms of 295 billion. So the growth is still there. The interesting thing about this, though, is the sort of monetary business model of the gaming industry actually is limited to the hands of a few. So it's really the upstream studios who are benefiting off of the sort of hours of work and effort and passion of the gamers. And I think, coming back to your question, Hal, is that there's a huge opportunity to introduce technology here with blockchain and the NFTs that basically gives back to the community, rewards them for their time, their attention. This is work in one essence. It's time, money spent, but also the passion that they have. And it's a great opportunity that if we can sort of change the table of the not just working for the game, but the game working for you, it's an incentivization model for users to be even more engaged, more sticky. So I think coming back to where NFTs come into a play, there's a model called play to earn that we've also been at the forefront of, and enabling blockchain games to support NFTs so that the more that users participate, earn as they have time and effort and skills as well, it generates tokenized digital items. And those digital items, the big difference being not just a list of an inventory of things that you have at your disposal to play the game, but they're now real assets, and assets that are tradable, assets that are usable in games or in the future, interoperable between games, and also assets that are most importantly of value. And I think I'll just sort of end this part of the story with the ideal that if we can just continue to incentivize and show benefit to the users, they are the ones, as somebody mentioned earlier about customers, they are the ones that will propel your own businesses forward. So it's always very important, and actually it's always very simple. Make your users winners, and they will help your business win.
And just to follow up, I mean, there's obviously some places like the Philippines where play to earn has really taken off. There's some companies like Animoca in Hong Kong who do things all over the world, doing a lot of gaming NFTs things with Sandbox, Axie Infinity in particular. Are there certain, do you think, geographies that lend themselves more to getting into this new era of gaming with NFTs and blockchain-based gaming versus maybe more legacy-based countries like the US? Or?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a global phenomenon. I'd actually even have to comment that some of the rising digital sort of economies, emerging markets, as well as Asia and Europe as well in some regards, high youth populations seem to they're ready to accept the new ways to operate, the new ways to be benefited. And maybe it comes back to this story, if your kids or young adults are sitting at home playing video games all day and the parents are coming in and saying, hey, go get a job. I say, hey, mom, dad, I've got it covered. I can now earn a living by generating NFTs and selling them and transacting and trading. So, close the door on the way out. So I think definitely youth populations and digitally smart economies are really going to be leveraging and benefiting from this.
And Jonathan, when we're talking about non-working assets and getting them into working assets, a great example here with gaming and collectibles. I know you've been involved in them. How does Lions Chain yourself? What are your thoughts on this? What can really accelerate this process, and what can really transform it, and especially from non-working assets to working assets?
Sure, that's a great question. To just jump off of the NFT conversation. So imagine now that you're playing a video game and you've been playing this for months or sometimes in many cases years, and you've collected a significant inventory of items. Those items have real-world value in many cases with games like World of Warcraft, which is not on a public blockchain yet. But those assets really just sit in your inventory, and they can't really provide value to you when you're not actively playing them, and they certainly don't provide value to anybody else. So imagine a scenario where if you were to perform some difficult quest, maybe with your guild, and then you received a very special item, and during the time period that you weren't playing the game, you could actually lend that out. So now that passive asset actually is earning you income when you're not using it. So that's one example. And that might seem trivial or very nuanced when it comes to gaming, but now let's take that to something more general like Apple stock. So we all use Robinhood, or many of us do, and the assets that I have sitting on Robinhood do just that. They sit there. But imagine if I was able to use that as collateral to be able to take a loan out against it. What if I was able to, again, lend that to somebody else that wanted to have leverage? And now I can earn passive income on the assets that I have. And so what I'm really excited about of what we've seen today with the whole DeFi movement is this concept of, let's take a look at what's happening in digital economies that are enclosed or siloed digital economies, whether it's the New York Stock Exchange or whether it's Ubisoft or Blizzard. And then how can we reimagine this if it was permissionless, if it was interoperable, if entrepreneurs could come and say that assets that were siloed within one ecosystem could now be used, reinvented to generate new use cases in other ecosystems.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up an interesting point. What do you think of this? There's a lot of debate when you're talking about enterprise or private blockchains versus public open source. Where do you see one area functioning and thriving, and where do you see others not so, or really, again, everybody's goal trying to get this technology mainstream? It makes sense for companies, it makes sense for individuals, it makes sense for countries that may not be as affluent as others. How do you see that private versus enterprise versus open source?
I think that it really, in order to create value, it really has to be open source. It really has to be composable and interoperable, which means that other entrepreneurs can come and create new use cases off of the technology that you've brought to market. And that's really not possible with enterprise blockchains or private blockchains. I've seen over the past, I guess I've been around since 2016 now. So during that time period, there's been some interesting experimentation, but 99.999% of the value that's been created in the space has been in the open source public ecosystem.
Interesting. Brian, as if the global pandemic wasn't enough, there's been a few natural disasters, for lack of a better word, around the world. States with the California wildfires, PG&E and the electricity issues that came as a result of that, Texas blackouts, things like that, electrical hacks in places like India. I mean, these are obviously big legacy, massive, energy and non-sustainable, sustainable things that are just enormous things for people to tackle. How do you, first of all, how do you see the impact of what's actually happening now? And second of all, with the adoption and now some of these countries and electrical grids been forced to look at some of the blockchain technology, how do you see things, potentially improving or having some solutions in this?
Yeah, first let me just pre-qualify a little bit. This is a little bit close to my heart because back in 2015 I co-founded the Columbia University Blockchain Alliance with one of my classmates. And one of the things that we talked about were the use cases of blockchain. Of course, everybody thinks of finance, being able to trade peer-to-peer. Well, I see, and many others see, the huge opportunity to trade peer-to-peer energy through microgrids. And so to answer your question, a lot of these blackouts we have are really not, we could avoid these by having more of a distributed energy sector. So in the case of, let's take for example, PG&E in Northern California. Some of the problems have been that a lot of the lines are not buried and run directly through forests, and there's not, it's not a proven case that caused the fires. I will not say that, but there is a lot of trees. You can go out to YouTube. You can see how the wind will blow into a wire and it will cause very pretty colors. But if you can create microgrids, say in a neighborhood, microgrid technology has been out for a long time. It's nothing new. But what blockchain does, like what it does with the banking industry, is it gives people the ability to trade among themselves. And a lot of the interesting microgrid technologies, like for instance what Siemens is doing, integrate nicely into these blockchain platforms. And you can trade the tokens, and you can also have tokens within the individual blockchains for neighbors to be able to trade in a trustless environment. So, to answer your question, it's a new way of thinking from a standpoint of distributing our energy. Energy really is, to simplify the process with energy, there's basically the generator, the people that create the power. There's the transmission, the long-haul transmission, the big lines you see along the highway. And then, of course, you have, lastly, the distribution to the individual homes. What microgrids and blockchain would do is it disrupts the whole generation, because you could be a generator of power from a solar panel on your roof. The transmission, you can disrupt that as well, because you'll be transmitting between your neighbors. And then distribution, it will be kind of a blend of the transmission as well. So it really gives people the ability to sell power among their neighbors.
And when we talk about, some headline stuff, obviously, Elon Musk, for example, did a very quick, I don't want to say turnaround, but a comment, about Bitcoin mining and environmental impact. What do you think when people hear this? What kind of impact does it have? Because a lot of the general population, right, already has some fears or at least concerns about crypto and blockchain technology in general. What kind of impact do you think these statements have, and what can the industry do to try to counteract some of these things?
Yeah, that's an argument that's brought up a lot. And in my days at Columbia, I also had a chance to speak in D.C. To the Senate, and this came up as a big concern. And I do believe that there is a tremendous amount of energy that's wasted with proof of work. But at the same time, I think that this introduces a really huge opportunity for innovation on how we could fix many of these renewable sources of energy. But I would say the immediate answer to solve this, and what I'd say to people that we're quick to say that proof of work is causing major issues with energy, I'd say proof of stake, and there's many other types of proofs or consensus, such as proof of location, et cetera, that don't require the same kind of energy.
Alexis, saving the best for last, obviously. Switzerland's obviously first, maybe after chocolate, first thing people think about is finance and banking and things like that. They were one of the first countries to embrace, vaults or, token-based, custodial solutions, whatever it may be. How do you see this in terms of new business models and what we're talking about today, and potentially what you're working on and things like this? How do you see this moving forward in terms of both your company, Switzerland's role, but more importantly, getting legitimacy into the financing of blockchain-based or crypto technology?
So Switzerland has, from the start, since 2014, taken some very good steps, and the most important step that they took is that they didn't change one single law. They just applied the existing law, and they explained that in 2014. So you can immediately say, oh, Bitcoin can be treated as an asset, and then because it's an asset, then you could pay taxes and you could get a license. I was able to get the first Bitcoin broker license in 2014, and when the ICO wave came in 2017, there was already a lot of people doing things in Switzerland, and the financial authority looked at it, and they had a very, very good approach. So they didn't change any laws. Again, they put guidelines, and this is exactly what we are following right now with NIM, because NIM, we're building a mixnet, and mixnet is a set of computers which are put together to provide resources, so that we provide a network of anonymity for the users. But all these people, they share resources, and we want to incentivize them with a token. That's how we don't need to build ourselves the whole infrastructure. And there, we look at the guidelines of FINMA, and FINMA says, well, we don't care how your token is created on whatever blockchain or whatever technology. It doesn't matter. Each token has a purpose. So you have investment tokens, and you have payment tokens, and you have utility tokens. So when you look at your project, you start to say, okay, what is my token? It can be one of those three functions or the three functions together. But usually there's a prime function. So for Bitcoin, is a payment token. If you make a stable coin, it would be a payment token. If you would represent a share of an investment fund, it would be an investment token. And if you sell an access token, like we do, you buy a token so you can access the network, then it will be a utility token. And basically they set up this rule. They say, well, if you want to do these tokens, you're free to mint them, but then you have to go through a simple process where you need to go through a local financial intermediary that will take care of the money transfer and the KYC of the people who are buying the tokens. This is for pre-launch. And then once you start your operation, you even have the tax regime, which is adapted. So like as long as you have investors and your token is not existing, well, basically you get a provision. You're allowed to make a provision for future development. So basically you pay zero tax until you actually are live, and then you're going into the normal tax regime. So yeah, everything is set up well, but they just created guidelines based on the existing system. And in Neuchâtel, where we are, we have a local community. We have the local state bank. We have local law firms. All the different actors, they are very well synchronized, and that makes it a successful project. So NIM is going very well, but you might heard of Definity, which had applied exactly the same model.
I see you chomping at the bit.
I know. Yes. So I think it's important also, just for the subject of real-world use cases, to also bring up the governance token, which is, I guess, a subset of a utility token. And that's really designed to help coordinate a DAO, which is a group of members that are working together to be able to create a profitable business that's running ideally on-chain. And I think that's one of the biggest innovations that we've seen really come out of the space for the last 2 years. Curious what your thoughts are on the evolution of profitable DAOs.
Yeah. No, so we even have the DAO experience who took place a lot in Switzerland, and I was pretty active in that one. But no, you're right. There's some other typology of tokens, but they don't have a financial aim always. A governance is more like a voting. It can have sort of value, but it's more voting. So basically, the FINMA just focus on those three types, but they usually, and this is the power of tokens, they come together embedded with those other types of functions. So what is great, for example, now we can, and this is the only law adaptation that we did in Switzerland, is that we made it easier, because it was already possible, we made it easier to mint shares of a company as a token. And we're getting very close to a DAO in that sense, you know. And so with the share embedded, you have the right to vote. So your mixture between a governance token and a ownership token. And we did the studies about when the DAO in 2016 was created. We made a study in Switzerland about the existing the legal likelihood of the DAO, and we thought that actually in Switzerland would be completely feasible. We might have some adaptation in the code in the law, because in the law we only know about corporations, SA, Société Anonyme, and others. But basically, we believe that the scholars already believe that a DAO has a legal recognition. And you can make a contract with the DAO. So that is always also something which is already possible, and a new field in the legal world. So now we have those projects like NIM, for example. We are building it in a kind of like, the building part is somehow centralized. We have a real company, but the aim is that basically we will let the community take over through a DAO, and basically we have a mandate to build a DAO. That's how we see things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're getting the skull and crossbones that we're out of time now, but one word from each of you, or maybe two, you can say, just to wrap it up. I mean, we're talking about new business models in a post-COVID world, hopefully a totally post-COVID world soon, or at least one where we can deal with it. But when we talk about blockchain technology and how that affects the new business models, what are the one or two industries that, whether you're in it or not, that you think are going to be affected the most and the fastest by this? Just down the line quickly. Jonathan?
Finance is the obvious choice. I think that we're going to see markets. We're going to see the ability to gain access to synthetics or derivatives to real-world assets, and that's probably going to be the next big thing in crypto and in these new business models.
Okay, Warren?
Yeah, I think it would have to be, I'm going to stick with gamification and gaming in terms of driving benefit and entertaining folks, but I'd also add in there the healthcare sector. I think great opportunity to tokenize data and do a lot of things that are securing, but also safely providing that information across that sector too.
Brian?
You know, I'd have to agree that finance is probably the biggest banking. And by the way, if you want to learn more about a big initiative or experiment for the trading equities, the Delaware Blockchain Initiative a few years ago was a great study that was done. And then, of course, energy. I think that we could definitely solve the single point of failure in energy.
Well, I think really it's like even bigger than that. I mean, finance is an obvious thing because Bitcoin is about payment first, you know. So that was the initial slap in the head. But then it's about peer-to-peer commerce, peer-to-peer transactions and communications. And so every company, every system where you have individuals communicating, sharing, exchanging will be affected by this. So I think it's a major, major social change.
I think from my point of view, and a little self-awareness here, we think marketing hasn't changed a whole lot in 40 years. And marketing is one of those things that can bring everything we've just spoke about together. The way at Ojama we're using AI, big data, machine learning, everything on this. And with the rush in all of our industries and others that people have to deal with these new business models and this new online business world that everybody finds themselves in, I think everybody here is in agreement that blockchain is one of the best ways to do it, the underlying technology. So thanks everybody, thanks to our panelists for everybody being here. Massive thanks to Dubai for having us all here and hosting everything, and for you all attending. So thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.